So that was really a poor use of time. I didn't learn until much later in my career that it's cheaper to pay people to do the stuff you don't do well than it is to try to do it all.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Financial Dad. Today we have a special guest, Victor Nichols, who has been a close friend of the Financial Dads for several years. So he's going to tell you a little bit more about Victor.
I think several years is a gross understatement, Hal.
Long time.
Victor and I have known each other since we were probably around 14 or 15 years old, somewhere along those lines. Went to high school together, have stayed very good and close friends for a long time. Our paths have intertwined here and there, but both being entrepreneurs, I think we always had an affinity for each other and have remained very close friends as a result of that. And so I am happy to introduce a masterful networker, publishing, PR, and marketing expert, my dear friend, Victor Nichols. Welcome, Victor.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a big deal, baby.
Yeah, that's how you know you made it.
So, Victor, we love to always start by understanding what has the journey been, from college through now that ended up with you being an entrepreneur.
Well, I'm gonna try to condense it and keep it tight, but first I got to jump all the way back to like fourth grade, okay? All right, third grade, because that really was where the entrepreneurial thing started. I used to run to the candy store during lunchtime and take people's money, and then I would come back and take orders, and I would take a vig on top of that, and then that vig I would use to buy more candy. So in the middle of the day, I would put it in my desk and people would come to me and I would sell it for twice as much. So that's where I learned about supply and demand, was in
the Victor Vig.
the convenience charge.
I learned about it in grammar school. So that's where I really started to understand the power of, marking things up. Then the next, fast forward to college, I'll leave out the middle stuff. I really started my business in high school. I started in 1981. And I started in my parents' basement and grew a kind of a prep company, a printing prep company, into a full service printing company. And then from there, I went to a full service marketing communications firm. So the journey was about, I stayed within my skill sets, but the journey was really about continuing to move forward, putting brick by brick by brick by brick kind of a thing, as opposed to, oh my God, I'm going to be a millionaire tomorrow. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't happen. And I think very important, or germane to what you're trying to do with these podcasts, is to let entrepreneurs and people who are moving into business understand that there is a journey. It's not an overnight thing. And you're going to make mistakes and a pile of them. Learn from them. Don't make them twice, because then that makes you not very intelligent if you do it again. But make sure that you realize that you have to put the time and the effort in, and there's no silver bullet. That's probably one of the most valuable things I learned as I was moving through the stages, that there are no silver bullets and you got to stick with it.
Al?
I think that is super valuable. I think that people just starting out, it can be easy to think that you need to have everything perfect right away, or that there's a specific path you need to follow, but it's very individual, right? And very whatever you make it.
I agree. Absolutely agree. It's mercurial in nature, from the standpoint of view that there are certain things that you should follow, some basic things that you should follow, like you should have good financial sense. You should not be undercapitalized. You should probably consult an attorney, and you should probably consult somebody.
What does undercapitalized mean for the real newbies?
For the real newbies, for undercapitalization, I think some people, and I've had friends who in the way further in their careers have made the same mistake. They put a whole lot of money into the idea, but they didn't have enough money to market it. Okay. They undercapitalized the entire business because they were too caught up in the excitement of making it look pretty. Okay. And making it, and like, wow, this is just so exciting. And I want to make this thing great. And I want to buy this and that and this and that. And then when it comes to actually launching the business, they have no money to market it. Okay. Because marketing, when you're launching a business, is a massive piece that one has, whether you're going to invest it in time, money, or both. Because nowadays you got social media, you can groundswell. In mine and Tim's day, you actually had to buy advertising. You had to spend money.
Yeah.
You could go out and hand out flyers and things, but ultimately you have to spend some money. So undercapitalization means not planning to have enough money to start off to sustain in order for the business to survive.
Yeah, I'll just expand the definition to include not having enough money to hire staff that you need, not having enough money for the proper equipment and or the facilities that you're going to need. So, broadly speaking, it means not having enough money to do what you're planning to do.
Right.
To make it successful.
Exactly. Yeah. And so many people make that mistake because they don't think they don't want to think of they don't want to get in the weeds,
So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your relationship with money was like as a kid, and if through creating your own business, if that's changed at all for you and what it's like now.
Well, that's a very interesting question because I grew up in a house with two parents, obviously, and they were both teachers. But the interesting thing about it is that they both had separate checkbooks. They didn't do anything together. The only thing that they did was they took the bills and they split them down the middle, and my father paid half and my mother paid half, but they both paid. They wrote their own checks, they mailed their own bills and things like that. Other than I believe the mortgage, they really didn't even have things that had both of their names on them. And that was very unusual for in that time period.
Yeah.
They were both very much interested in, it worked seamlessly. I even asked my mother about this guy when I got older, and she said, we never discussed it. It just happened. It just happened. So my mother,
and it worked.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about that is that I knew a lot of other folks who maybe were even super traditional, where the mother didn't get involved in finances and things like that. And then when the father passed, it got very, very difficult. But there was no lag there. When my dad passed, my mom was always paying bills anyway, so she understood that. So that kind of had an influence on my idea of money. And that they always made sure that they had enough money to pay for the things that they needed to pay for. I'm the youngest of four boys. And then as I moved into business, I realized that, again, back to, needing money and not knowing exactly when you're going to need money and being able to have access to money became very, very precarious, and there were times where I couldn't meet payroll. And there were times where I couldn't, pay the bills for the supplies that I needed in order to get, things. So then you say, wow. This is something I got to deal with. So you go to a bank and you try to convince them to lend you some money, or you get somebody to co-sign for you. And all of those things you learn along the way if you are really dedicated to doing what you're doing. So my relationship with money became a lot more real when I was realizing that I couldn't pay my bills. Okay.
That'll teach you.
That's when it got real. Okay. That's when it got real. Where I couldn't go to mom and dad and say, hey, I need to pay this bill. And they're like, well, this is, we can't help you with that. So that's when it got real. And so it changed my relationship where I tried to always be properly capitalized. And I'm going to share one quick thing. When I had my partners in my other business, is that there was 3 partners, but what we did was something that I don't think every business does, is when we divided up the money for our partnership shares, we divided it 4 ways. We put as if we had a 4th partner, and we took less money as partners and put money in as if there was another partner, and we left it in the bank, and we let that build, and we used that money to finance jobs. And as the business matured, at a certain point, we all looked at each other, we had our meeting and said, okay, I don't think we need to have that reserve anymore. And then we divided it up.
That's a great way, Vic, of dealing with that issue. One of my questions that I typically ask people is about how or when did you determine that you were in a position not to leave money in the company, to take more salary, to take a bonus, to start saving money outside of the company, that kind of thing. So I think that those are really hard things for entrepreneurs to deal with, because I think you get that once you have that fear of not paying the bills, it stays with you
It
for a long time.
It never goes away, bro.
It really
never goes away.
It does. All right. So let me ask you this. You talked about skills before, that you understood your skill set. I'm going to ask a kind of a two-part question.
Sure.
How would you describe what you think are your unique skills?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you handle things in running the business, like, for example, time management, managing your day, and, you know, staying on top of your to-do list and things like that? So it's a skill set, and then specifically time management.
I think my skill set has always been, in every iteration that I've had, whether I've been by myself or I've had partners, my skill set is to be a rainmaker. Okay. I know a lot about my businesses and I understand them. And I used to run presses and I used to run them myself, and I know how to do all that stuff. Hated all of it. Hated all of that. What I am is a salesperson. And I'm also a visionary, big thinker. Okay. I can see things further off in the distance, and I'm not afraid to take chances. So that's I always used to say to all my partners, I say, look, I'm going to go out and make rain, run around with buckets, catch it, do what you got to do with it, put it through the mill, whatever you got to do, because that's what you do best. I'm going to continue to make rain, and I'm going to continue to go out there and try to open up opportunities. That's what I do. And that, I think, has always been the best use of my skill set. I haven't always been able to do it, because in the beginning years, you had to do everything, you know, all of those other things. And I'm typesetting and I'm running presses and I'm sweeping up and I'm doing whatever I had to do. So that was really a poor use of time. I didn't learn until much later in my career that it's cheaper to pay people to do the stuff you don't do well than it is to try to do it all.
Yeah.
And, you know, accounting is my worst thing. I am horrible at it. I am the first to admit it. It's tedious. I suck at it, and I tried to do it. And it was a really major league problem. So much so that when I had an accountant, he's like, bro, okay, you got to knock this off. You got to get a bookkeeper, or you're going to be out of business a lot sooner than you think. Okay.
Yeah.
It got that bad. Those were cathartic moments in my evolution. And I'm like, and I have never done it for 25 years. I haven't touched it. I mean, I look at my reports and I understand what financial reports are and what they look like and how to read them, but I don't do it. Time management, that was also a tough one. Okay. Really tough one. I started my business out of my parents' house. So, I can always do the laundry. Oh yeah, let me go do the laundry.
Well, that's not unlike a lot of people today, Vic.
Bro, it's not. And it really served me well, because I got a head start on all these people who couldn't figure it out during COVID, you know, because I'd been doing it for decades by then. But the first 3 years, I was like, okay, do that. And let me go down and make some bacon and eggs. And let me, okay. And the day would go by and I'm like, holy shit, I didn't make any money. I didn't get this proposal out that I was supposed to get out. And I'm like, okay, this is really, really hard. And that was all about time management. Every bit of that problem was time management. Fast forward, I started to talk to some of my mentors, and I started to talk to people like Tony Jones and Pamela Goldstein and Hank Henderson and some of these other people who were really, really incredibly brilliant people and business people, but who were very organized. And I started to learn about how important it was to prioritize what's important, what's kind of important, and what's absolutely a maybe. Okay. Okay. And if you never get to an absolute maybe, that's fine. All right. But you better get to the other two, because they're essential to running your business. And it's discipline. And I cannot tell you how hard that was for me, especially as an entrepreneur, that every shiny penny was something else to do. You know, I'm like, ooh, that looks like fun. Let me try that. You know what I mean? Instead of focusing on the core thing at hand. So it took me it took me years to get that right.
I'm kind of combining these last two things that you said in my brain with delegating, and how that saves you both time and cost in the future, and probably will make your business more lucrative, because you'll have more people doing those things who are skilled at them. More skilled than you are, less likely to make mistakes, especially in bookkeeping.
And do it quicker.
Yeah, and do it quicker. And then also it's this balance, I think, when you're starting out, between time management and focusing on the most important things, but figuring out what those things are because you are doing everything at the beginning.
And that you bring up a great point. For me, it was more black and white than gray, because I started to realize the importance of doing the things that needed to be done. The way I delineated them was, is what I'm going to do make me money? That's how
a very clear, streamlined way of going about it.
It was all about the Benjamins. Okay. Okay. If what I'm going to do is going to make me money, I'm going to focus on that. Okay. And do my best to get that task done, whatever it might be, because I know, at least I think, it's going to make me money. That was now, as I got further along in my career, it got less about that and more about, is it better for the business? Is it good for the person you're working with? Is it good for your client? That didn't come into play when I didn't have any money.
Yeah. It gets more complex as your business gets more complex. I would love to know things that you did starting out that you feel like we'll do that. It's a double-sided coin. It's a double-sided Benjamin. Things that you did starting out that you feel like added to your success, and things that you did that you feel like were not helpful, but you learned from and had to grow from.
I'm gonna tell you a very, very brief story about, because keep in mind, I started my business back in the 80s. Okay. And when I was in business or starting the business, I was out there handing out flyers and calling up people and everything. So I started to get some groundwork, because I give pretty good phone. I mean, I understand how to get people, excited about what it is. At the time, I would get appointments, and there's an interesting lesson here. At the time, I would get appointments, and then I would show up to these appointments, and all of a sudden, when they saw me, they wouldn't see me, because there was prejudice issues. There was also youth issues. Combining those two things are like, what does this friggin' guy know how to do? And I could have gone two different ways, and this is why your question is so important. I could have kind of given up and said, you know what, society's against me and I can't get anything done. But what I did do was I put flyers up at Seton Hall, and I only hired white females. The point I'm trying to make is problem solving. It's a problem solving thing.
Yeah.
I didn't have any feeling about that one way or another, because I needed to get the business. Okay. So I said, if that's what you want, that's what I'll give you. So I would set up the appointments and send them in. And they would close the deals. I tell them exactly what to do, close the deals and bring the deal back. And that's how I started my business. If I hadn't done that, I'm not sure I would have gotten it off the ground.
Yeah. Well, you had to work around. It's like a workaround for other people's
And I didn't
judgment.
feel bad about it. I really never felt bad about it, because I never took it personal. I'm like, hey, this is just another business problem. It's just another business problem. And
I think that is a huge important thing, I think, for people to hear, not to take things personally, especially in business, and especially if what you do is largely about how you present yourself, who you are, what you look like anything in the creative zone, anything in sales where you are putting yourself on the line and you have to convince someone to want something, or convince someone of your skills. Being an actress, totally. That you can't take it personally.
Your entire life, sure, and all of the things that you've done, you've dealt with rejection.
Yeah, you started with cold calls too, Dad.
Yeah, 100 cold calls a day.
And it's like, for whatever reason, if you took it personally that they were rude to you or hung up on you, or with you, Victor, that they judged you or underestimated you or belittled you.
I can find a job somewhere. There's an easier path. I can't take this anymore.
Can I interject a story about cold calling and rejection? Somewhere along the line, I figured out how many phone calls it took to get an appointment, and then how many appointments it took to get a client, and how much money I made for every client. And I started working the math back, and it turned out that I made $5 every time someone said no to me on the phone. So I just changed my entire attitude, and I said, okay, well, if they say no, that's great. It's $5, because the numbers were really very consistent for years. And instead of looking at it as I'm getting rejected and I'm, it's painful and everything else, which it is, but I started looking at it as, that much closer to the next yes, basically, and that if I could just get to that next yes, I'm making money by doing this. It's what you have to do to make the money. And, it's sustained.
So, and now you want some mistakes?
Oh yeah.
Well,
We
we're out of
gotta
time,
run through
Vic.
you. No, give us the things that went wrong.
I'll give you a mistake that is kind of a universal type of a mistake that I made for, throughout my career. And I started to learn how to not make this mistake anymore. I'm going to give you a prime example. As an entrepreneur, when somebody would come to you with a new idea or a new thing or a new opportunity, it's like, I'm on it. I love it. The excitement of doing something new far outweighs the daily grind of doing what you normally do. Okay. Even if you love it. Okay. It's just exciting for an entrepreneur. So I would get involved in businesses and put time and effort and focus into them or opportunities that I really had no business being involved in. And I'm going to give you one specifically. I actually owned many businesses, and one of them was a traffic data collection business. Okay. Where you collect data. People stand on the street corner and they collect people walking by and cars going by. That's for engineering companies. Okay. That data is then put together in a computer system, and you give that to somebody who's going to be building a shopping mall or whatever. They want to know what the traffic is because they have to get for ordinances and all kinds of different things. But there's a company that's a traffic data company. Now it's all done by camera. But before you have to have per people with little computer thingies on the street. Somebody came to me and they said, we have this contract and we're looking for a vendor. At the point, it was a minority vendor to do this. And there are no minority owned traffic data collection companies, 0. So what did I do? I started a traffic data collection company. Okay. All right. Because I had built in business. And once I did that, I got the equipment, I got it going and, got it moving along, realized that I only had one client, the company and when that company was no longer my client, I was immediately out of business. Okay. Because I didn't think of it as a complete business. I thought of it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And if I thought of it as a business, I would have always been out there looking for other clients, but I looked at it as an opportunity, not as a business. Major mistake. And I've done it more than once. But I'm just giving you a clear example that is a mistake that I urge folks not to make because it costs time and it's painful and it costs money. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a mistake not to make, and you really have to think hard and long and do your due diligence before you jump into another thing.
Yeah. And think about how, because I'm thinking about how you invested your money in equipment and all that stuff. And it's
learning. I have to learn how to use
and your time, you took your time and your focus away from other pursuits that probably had more longevity.
And would have made more money. For sure.
Vic, if I could just say quickly, in a sense, what you're talking about is business discipline.
Beautiful.
In other words, that you have, if you want to run a successful business, you need to have the discipline to have a plan and be willing to veer from the plan when it really seems necessary, but not every opportunity is something that you must take advantage of. If you're in a business that is going well, sticking to your plan and seeing that through to some level of success before you get the next plate spinning in the air, right?
Yep.
Is a really critical aspect, I think, of success in business.
Well said. And one of the safeguards against that is to utilize external mentors and external professionals and people that you trust. They will stop you from doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going on any unnecessary side quests.
Ludicrous idea, and don't do it.
Right. If you have some sort of an advisory board as a business or something like that, and you say, oh, I'm going to do this, they'll go, wait, you just pitched us on all this, right, and that you're going to do this, and now you want to go do that.
Do this.
Yeah.
So other people can help keep you in check, and that really the mentor thing and what you're doing, Tim, with what you're building here is the idea of people utilizing that experience and understanding that these are the things you need to put in place early. It saves you so much pain throughout the entire journey.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I've been blessed to have a business partner who's just an extraordinarily successful man and family out of Florida for going on 25 years, I guess, at this point. And it's done exactly that. It's kept us on track, kept us focused, and made the company a very good, successful company for everybody.
Before we wrap up, I want to know if you have any advice for people just starting out, whether it's specific to business or mindset, anything you would like to share as parting words of wisdom to anyone watching.
I would think the single most important thing is to find and identify a mentor. That would be the most important thing. Someone who can guide you in those beginning stages and really keep you grounded, so you understand that there is a path. And by the way, the path has guardrails. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you might bump off of them, but you're not going over them.
Yeah.
Think about it. Guardrails are there to keep us from going over cliffs.
Exactly.
Okay.
Boom. So that's the
see the view, but not drive over it.
Right. I mean, obviously, we could get into a lot of different things, but that's the most succinct, single most important thing to me.
Awesome, Vic. Thank you so much. Sure. So, Vic, tell us where people can find you on social media and
on social media. Probably the best place is VMN Sales Tips on Instagram.
Yeah,
I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on TikTok. And I just started getting onto X.
Oh wow,
that's an interesting platform, and I'm just starting to learn about it. It's really kind of exciting. So those are probably my main ones, and of course, Facebook. I do stuff with my magazines on Facebook, and I do stuff personal, and also with the band, with music on Facebook.
Twitter is an amazing. X is an amazing platform, but man, people do not hold back at all.
No, they don't, and that's the reason why I said it's interesting, because I'm wading into it in a very deliberate way.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not wading into it as being, controversial or polarizing or any of those things.
Yep.
I'm wading into it in a way where it is so much information, good and bad, being exchanged, that I believe that if you want to understand what's really going on a broad base, you need to be involved in that so you can really start to make your own decisions, because it's one of the places where it's both sides. And I'm not just talking.
That's very true. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you are more involved on social media than I am. So how does it feel to be a cool kid? Oh, okay. And one other thing I have to share before we leave is that, and we talked about this right before we started recording, but Victor actually paid me my first paid acting job. He got it for me and sponsored me playing the character of Go Diego Go at Newark's Liberty Science Museum Dino Day. So Victor has actually been influential in my career as an actor.
Okay. Now, you have to remember, Hallie, and this is the most important thing of all. When you are on that podium and you are getting that Academy Award, you must share that.
I will. all my
share that, because I will be there.
I want to thank my dad, but I really want to thank Victor Nichols, who launched my career.
That's it. Okay, and Tim, verbatim. I'm glad we got this on tape.
We'll play this video at the ceremony.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay. Well, Victor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.